Welcome to the Integrated Literacy for Experienced Multilinguals course. My name is Huynh, and it's good to see you. At the time of this recording, I am so honored to work at the International School Phnom Penh in Cambodia. It's a K to EY to 12 school. And I work specifically in the grade 7 class, and I work with the entire grade 7. And this is one of the classes that I go to, and I support even in art classes, drama classes, music classes. I also had a very quick stint as a social studies teacher. This is my social studies classes, one of my classes when I taught in grade 6, 8, and 10 in Bangkok. I also had a very quick stint as an EAL teacher in 5th grade. I wanted to know what that's like, just like I wanted to know what it's like to teach content as well. And this picture that you're seeing here are my students in 5th grade at a school in Vietnam. When I'm not teaching, I am doing all things ML, such as nerding out on my podcast, teaching ML's podcast. And I also am so honored to have written several books, in particular about experienced multilinguals. I have 3 loves in my life. The first one is badminton. The second one is Bo. He's the one with the little bow in his head. He's 15 years old at the time of the recording. And this is Jampa. He's really recently rescued. He's 3 years old, and he just loves to cuddle and chew things. When Beth and I were out presenting the first book that we wrote together, Long-Term Success for Experienced Multilinguals, teachers would say, you have a book for content teachers, but what about a book for ELD teachers? We looked at each other and we thought, you know what, that's exactly what we need to do, because the principles and the framework are very similar to book 1, can be and is applied to book 2. We thought about it and we're like, actually, that makes a lot of sense. And so we took the framework from book 1 and applied it to the current framework in book 2. If you are part of this book study, then most likely you want to know how to develop academic language of multilinguals who have intermediate proficiency, aka experienced multilinguals. But to do that within particularly a dedicated ELD class, or for some of you, you have small group instruction, how do you do that within that setting? So this book is to show you how to do that. Part 1 is showing you a deep dive into the framework and how to plan at the unit level, the lesson level. Part 2 are the units and how do you progress from unit 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. But before we get to the framework, let's look at the instruction needs of experienced multilinguals. As you see from this graphic, the instruction needs of multilinguals are planning from the summative, integrating all the dimensions of the language, integrating all the language domains, and acquiring topic-specific content through a text set. I'll show you what that looks like through the framework. This chapter has 4 guiding questions. Who are experienced multilinguals? What is the dilemma for experienced multilinguals? What is the dilemma for ELD teachers? And then what is the opportunity? Let's go through each of those questions. We're going to focus first on non-English proficient and limited English proficient students. Please produce this graphic organizer in your notes so that it gives you an opportunity to really pause and interact with the course. Please pause the video now and reproduce this graphic organizer. The way I teach the concept of language acquisition is using a plateau. At the beginning of the plateau, we see newcomers, and this book is not for newcomers. We typically want students who are newcomers to end a sentence with a very specific word, or begin a sentence with a very specific word. And typically that word is a single syllable and it's really short. For example, we say mountains are, and we want them to say big. Right? So go to your graphic organizer that you just created, and in the middle column, like I did here, write a sentence starter, like mountains are, and then write the target word that you want students to say or read when they do that sentence starter. Right? So pause the video right now and do your example. Newcomers are at the beginning of this plateau in this bottom part, and they progress very rapidly. That's represented by the very steep incline in language acquisition here in the plateau. And then experienced multilinguals plateau in their language development because they use conversational proficiency when talking about academic assignments and in academic settings. So if we ask them to tell us about mountains or to analyze or describe a mountain, they'll say things like simple sentences like mountains are hard to climb. The tops of mountains are pointy. And this book serves MLs with this kind of social proficiency. We call them experienced multilinguals instead of long-term English learners, like LTELs, or it's usually typically called in the field. Cummings said that it takes 2 years to develop social proficiency from beginning English level. Let's go to our graphic organizer again, and for the conversational in the middle, right? Conversational, and then for you here's my example. Mountains are hard to climb. The tops of mountains are pointy. Please do it now for the context that you use for beginning. Right? If you use giraffes, write about giraffes here again, but give me 2 simple sentences. They're not complex. They're just noun verb details. Pause the video now and do the same thing. Let's look at the next group of students we're going to look at. These are former English language learners, and they're characterized as fully English proficient. And this is what is in the book, but because I get to change things around for the video, I'm going to call them proficient academic English. I wish we had to put this more asset-based term description than what we have in the book. So academic proficiency sounds like this. While mountains typically have triangular or rounded peaks, plateaus are characterized by having flat, extended tops. Look at this, the complexity, the vocabulary, the structure of the sentences, the grammar in it, right? This book seeks to cultivate academic proficiency in experienced multilinguals so they can read and write like this at this level. Let's go to your graphic organizer and write the most complex sentence about the same topic with advanced vocabulary and sophisticated sentence structure on the academic column of your trifold. It might start with although, since, because, not only, due to. Okay? So here's mine. Now you do the same thing for yours. If you use giraffes for the beginning and then the conversational or newcomer, let's move to the academic side and write here. Write a sentence about the same topic, but the most complex as possible. So we already know that Cummings said that students who are newcomers, they acquire basic interpersonal communication skills. It takes 2 years. It's just conversational skills. But for CALP, cognitive academic language proficiency, it actually takes 5 to 7 years with explicit instruction. And this book actually is going to show you what 1 year of that explicit instruction looks like. So we spent the last few minutes looking at who are experienced multilinguals. Please pause and reflect and answer this question. Please start your response with if or a while. Who are experienced multilinguals? Now that we answered the first question, who are experienced multilinguals, let's answer the second one. What is the dilemma for experienced multilinguals? The way to answer this question is to give you an example. So let's look at the different types of landforms. There's plateau and mountains. We just looked at them. But then this is an example of writing found in text assigned possibly to grade students from 4 to 12. While a mountain is a steep elevation of Earth's surface characterized by a pointed summit, a plateau is an extensive, flat, elevated land area bounded by steep slopes or escarpments. I mean, that is difficult because we're comparing plateaus and mountains, and we're putting them into a single sentence using separate ideas, like as found in this graphic organizer, in this graphic, but then putting them together, fusing that idea together is very complex. So let's look at an example of a writing assignment from grades 4 to 12. Contrast the features of a mountain to those of a plateau. Now let's look at an example of a hypothetical writing from Experienced Multilinguals. A mountain is a high part of the Earth's surface. A plateau is a large area of high land. It has very steep slopes. The top of the mountain is pointed. The top of the plateau is flat. It is surrounded by steep slopes or cliffs. Notice how in the writing of Experienced Multilinguals, they understand what a plateau and a mountain is, but they struggle to bring all those separate details into one cohesive sentence. They have difficulty reading a sentence like we had before, and they want sentences that are very simple like this. And it's difficult. Meaning it's difficult when they see sentences like this, and they're asked to write sentences like that. It's not that they can't, but it's that they don't yet know how to do that. And this book shows you how to do that. And the way that Beth and I are sharing this process or to teach this process is through the input-output loop. So on one side, we say students, the dilemma is that the students struggle to comprehend academic texts assigned in grades 4 to 12. And as a result, they struggle to write academic texts about content in grades 4 to 12. Because experienced multilinguals use conversational language when writing, they struggle to comprehend the text. So it's a vicious cycle that loops around. They struggle to comprehend, and so they struggle to write at that level. Because they struggle to write at that level, they don't have that language structure yet, the concepts or academic language concepts yet. They struggle to produce that kind of language. Now it's time for you to pause the video and reflect on this question. What is the dilemma for experienced multilinguals? Start your response with when or because. Please pause the video. Now let's move to the third question. What is the dilemma for ELD teachers? ELD teachers are often giving ELD standards or just standards at all. And then the standards say, okay, there's listening, reading, writing, speaking, and go teach them all. And because the standards structure proficiency at the language domains, listening, reading, speaking, and writing, what happens is that teachers often teach like that. To try to reach the reading comprehension standard, they do activities like this. Or to meet the listening comprehension standards, they do listening activities like this. And then same thing for speaking. We find fun topics for them to debate about. And then we also do prompts that are fun for them to write about. So this video is recorded in July of 2026. And when I looked at the Amazon bestsellers, you can see that the bestsellers in language arts teaching materials are, if you look at the top 6, they're basically workbooks. 1 on handwriting, actually 2 on handwriting, and 3 on vocabulary words. But they're not about instruction. They're just like 100 words you can teach your kids. Weighty words too, like weighty workbook words. Like these are words that they're not connected at all. Thank goodness the writing revolution is there because it actually shows you a teaching methodology. So teaching the language domains and the dimensions of language are isolated skills that results in seeing an elephant for its different parts. What happens is the language domains and the dimensions of language are all separated and they're not integrated. And that's the dilemma for ELD teachers when they are given ELD classes. So please reflect here. What is the dilemma for ELD teachers? Please start your response with while or although. Please pause the video now. So the opportunity is here is to take those building materials and to create a meaningful context to apply the building materials. Stone is not there just for it to be there. The stone in this picture is there specifically as a walkway, just like the beams are there specifically for a purpose. The things that we teach our students in the standards and the language domains serve a very specific function. And this is very similar to the concept of systemic functional linguistics. In our first book, we shared instruction for vocabulary, sentence structure, organization, and context. But in book 2, the one that you're studying right now, is we've put them all together in very specific chapters. I'll break each of these into their own dimensions. The first one is context, and the context is always around a novel. And I'll give you an example. The first one we're going to look at is Garvey's Choice by Nikki Grimes. But we're not going to look at activities to do with them for any text that we look at. We look at the summative. Mine is contrast Garvey's personal experiences with his father's parental aspirations. Produce an informational essay with an introduction and at least 3 informative body paragraphs to show Garvey's personal preferences and his father's parental aspirations. Now, this is just an example. My units are just an example to show you how I contextualize all the principles that I was sharing. And so you please do not follow, like, we're going to take this unit and we're going to do it exactly what Tan says. No. I'm going to give you my example so that it can give you context to apply it to your own context. The next dimension is vocabulary. That's going to be covered in chapter 5 in more detail. There are 2 categories of words that I really focus on when teaching vocabulary for my units. There's thinking verbs and conceptual vocabulary. They come from the summative. So contrast is the main thinking verb we want our students to learn. The next category is conceptual vocabulary. So the conceptual vocabulary here in the summative are personal preferences and parental aspirations. These are the words that are going to go throughout the unit and are very important conceptually to the events in the story and the concepts of the book. We also look at unit-specific vocabulary, and these are words that are very particular to this text. So it might be value, prefers, or preferences. The last category of words are unit-specific vocabulary. Like, you can think about them as tier 3 words. For example, in ours might be value and personal preferences or prefers. And so these are the different forms of words that come from this very specific text. The next dimension is sentence structure. So let's look at here, and we'll look at that chapter in 6. Let me give you some examples here. Garvey prefers creative musical activities. So he joins the school chorus to express himself through singing. Garvey gets the tenor solo, but he keeps his participation in the chorus a secret from his father. Listening to music makes him feel relaxed, and singing allows him to be expressive. The sentence structures that I'll be teaching in Unit 1 are compound sentences, the simple sentences, and then combining them through compound sentences. The last dimension is organizational patterns, which again are in Chapter 6. We'll go more deeply into Chapter 6 later. So for this text, we have an introduction. This is how I want my students to organize their informational essay. There's an introduction. And then the essay, the body paragraph are broken up into categories. Garvey's personal preferences. One is for music. One is for solitude. And then his dad's parental aspiration, which are sports. And this is the organizational pattern, the structure of the informational essay that I want my students to follow. And I'll show you how I structure this later when we look at the different units. So what I just did in the last few minutes was to show you how I created what a unit would look like, integrating all the dimensions of language. It's so very different than isolating them into standalone dimensions of language. Please pause the video and answer this question. What did you notice about designing a unit that intentionally integrates all the dimensions of language around a central text like we did for Garvey's Choice? Please pause the video now and reflect. So we just looked at a unit and what it would look like at the very surface level. In the next few sessions, I will show you how I create the unit and you'll follow along. But I know you're asking, what does the lesson look like using this framework? And I'll take you into my actual classroom. This is my actual classroom where I teach my students what that would look like. My students are at phases 2 to phase 4 in WIDA. So they're no longer beginner, but they have proficiency, social language proficiency. What we do with them is that they listen to me read aloud a segment of text from our novel, our central text. Then for speaking, I have them speak to process the segment of text, paying careful attention to the events that make Garvey feel accepted or rejected. So that's what we're doing for this unit. As they're listening, I'm pausing to have them talk, and I'm having them talk about the segment of text. They're carefully paying attention to the specific events that make Garvey feel accepted or rejected. So there's a purpose for their speaking. And there's a purpose for their writing. Once they listen to me read, once they talk about what they just read, then they're going to collaboratively write an answer to a prompt using a specific sentence structure. So we listen to a segment of text. I ask them a prompt, but they speak about it first. Then they formalize their response during the speech in writing. But they have to use a very specific sentence structure to do so. But in order to write the answer to the prompt, they actually have to go back to reread the segment of text for details related to acceptance or rejection. And they have to reread their sentence that they wrote together to make sure that it answers the question and that it follows this very specific sentence structure. That's how I integrate listening, speaking, writing, and reading into the text, into the unit about Garvey's choice using the framework. So time for your reflection. What is the opportunity for experienced multilinguals and ELD teachers? Start your response with by or to. Please pause the video now. So in video 1 or chapter 1, we looked at the instructional needs of experienced multilinguals. Now we move to the opportunity to look at the integrated literacy framework. I somewhat introduced it to you already, but here we're going to look at a deep dive into the different parts of the integrated literacy framework to show you how we can actually create units that are integrated. I'll see you in the next video.